Now more than ever, Lowe's knows you don't just want a low price, you want the lowest price. And with our lowest price guarantee, you can count on us for competitive prices on all your home improvement projects. If you find a qualifying lower price somewhere else on the same item, we'll match it. Lowe's, we help, you save. Price match applies to same item. Current price at qualifying retailers. Exclusions and terms apply. Learn how we'll match price at lowes.com/lowest price guarantee.
Hey guys, I found the only gift that Dad wants this Father's Day. Goldbelly. Goldbelly ships the most iconic foods from the best restaurants across the country straight to his door for free. Let him relax and enjoy award-winning barbecue from Texas, epic deep dish pizza from Chicago, or colossal pastrami sandwiches from New York. Make Dad feel like an absolute legend this Father's Day and go to goldbelly.com to get 20% off your first order with promo code DAD. That's goldbelly.com, code DAD.
Content warning for discussions of child sexual abuse and religious trauma. Someplace underneath.
Oh, man, I had a dream last night. Donald Trump appeared in my dream, and he said, Amber, you're going to have such a great time in Los Angeles becoming the woman you are. It was so weird.
Ew.
I don't know why that happened. He might, represent something in my dreams, but...
The patriarchy.
And maybe just, turning into the woman I am.
Why is he being so positive?
Yeah, that's actually
very
nice
uncommon.
to me.
Maybe you got Neuralinked.
Oh, fuck!
Did you get an implant?
Oh, didn't Elon Musk put him in a bunch of monkeys and they all flipped out? Mm-hmm. I can't wait to get the chip in us.
Yeah. Not Mark of the Beast because it's with Trump, so I guess that means it's fine.
It's fine. I remember I was taking a flight a couple years ago and I was waiting for the bus outside of the terminal of the airport and I thought I almost dropped my phone and I was like, oh my God, this has my Airbnb information on it. Everybody's phone number. I would just be in Florida. There's blue ball in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's coming.
Got to get in the cloud.
All right.
Do you have a lock on your phone, a screen lock?
Sure.
You got to do it. It will be much better for you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Just like a code, just like a swipe.
Oh, I have a little code thingy.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Some people don't have that on their phone.
I gotta get it. I gotta understand AI. It's the age of Aquarius, Natalie. We gotta get AI, crypto, zooted out.
I don't want to.
You want to return to nature?
I don't want to. Do we have to get? I don't want to do crypto.
Did you hear about the guy that he was playing Russian roulette on X and then he was like, if I die, make a crypto meme out of me. And then one of the bullets was in the thing and then he bled out on live for 30 minutes and they made a meme coin out of him.
Welcome to Someplace Underneath. I'm Natalie Jean.
I'm Amber Nelson.
That happened when?
A couple days ago.
An American?
Breaking news. Yeah, I think he lost his last $500 on a meme coin and was just like, all right, let's play Russian roulette live on X. And for 30 minutes, no one stopped it and they watched him bleed out.
This is, it doesn't even, it's not even, it doesn't mean anything anymore, right? Being, oh, this is Orwellian, this is Idiocracy, because how many times can you say that? So, I don't know.
Yeah, it just is.
That is something.
I always thought the age of Aquarius would be more human rights and yay, and friendlier to robots and not just bleeding out on a crypto website.
Okay, so let's try to put it into the brighter side viewpoint, which I've had this spoken to me before, and I think it could be true, is that this is a death rattle of extremely patriarchal, stringent beliefs, and they're dying out, and this is them doing everything they can to hold on, but it's not going to probably be possible for them to stay in this world.
In this prison that they've created for themselves?
Yeah.
No.
So it could just be that. I mean, that doesn't help that guy who just died on the internet. Twitter,
Thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. Well, I guess that is his body's choice.
I guess. And, and this also relates to what we're talking about today of just the sex abuse, the power.
Yeah.
The corrupt power.
How do we segue out of that? This is not going to be any more pleasant, unfortunately. We're still in this zone of talking about satanic ritual abuse and false recovered memory syndrome. And also, it's just sex abuse is so complex and so misunderstood in so many instances. And while we're talking about these false memory recovery instances, of course, that doesn't mean that tons and tons of sex abuse isn't happening inside of the church. And in fact, there's so many happening. Sometimes I run across them in the wild, and I just came across a reel or something of a family speaking about their experience with the father of the family. And he, it's the mom and the daughter, and they're talking about how they had to turn him in. And then they mentioned Mormonism. And so I was like, oh, it's a Mormon person. Great. And then I was like, is he showing up on Floodlit? Because I figured out his name from the context clues. And then he's on there. And it says that he is on the sex offender registry, currently still an elders quorum president.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. You just run across these in the wild. It was just somebody talking about their personal experience, and then you figure out it's somebody from the church, LDS church, and they're active. They're a leader.
Wow. And then he won't be checked because someone who got him into power, it would question their ability.
Yeah. It sounds like he received a lot of support from their tight-knit community. And so the woman, the mother and daughter, they left the church. He was not excommunicated for those charges, and in fact is now still holding a leadership position there. That's just fun. That's a fun little
tidbit,
Easter egg that I found the other day, I guess, if you want to call it that. This led me down this chain of looking up active leaders who either have charges on them or so many accusations that would be unlikely to be false. And there are more than one. There's another one I just found, David Brian Farley. He was a doctor and an LDS church member in Oregon, and he has never been charged, but he has well over 100 accusations against him.
That's a lot. I could see one or two accusations of I don't know, wow, 100?
Yeah. So, yes. And it was years and years. It was when he was in practice. He was doing a lot of really horrible stuff to patients. The courts couldn't find enough sufficient evidence, even though they said, we believe the victims. We can't charge him because we don't have the proof. And then he just went back to the church. He's he has callings. He's in Nephi, Utah. And he just continues to be a part of the community. No charges, nothing.
He looks really creepy. He looks like the kind of guy that would shake your hand in the church and then would finger you a little bit in your palm.
He does look kind of sweaty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's happening right now. I guess they're acting as though they've helped the situation because his callings don't involve being around children. I would argue that you are going to be around children being a respected member of the church. Just because your calling is cleaning, being a janitor, doesn't mean you suddenly won't have access to children. I don't know what to do with that information, Amber. He is just living his life. Over 100 accusations, just living his life. So that is to say, there are many real crimes happening here. But last week we had the introduction to false memory recovery. and how some of the LDS entrenched therapists knowingly or unknowingly participated in planting memories into patients who were themselves mostly LDS members. So separating the therapist from this religion is nearly impossible because of how all-consuming being an active member of the LDS Church is. Every aspect of a member's life is permeated with doctrine, rules, time demands, lifestyle requirements, and maybe most importantly to this story, fear. Fear is the most important aspect of a high control group. It's fitting that the satanic panic would melt in seamlessly with the scrupulosity required to maintain LDS faith. This is something that's going to result in a case of iatrogenesis.
Ooh, what's that?
It's a new word for me, which basically means a medical misstep. So it can involve mismedicating somebody. It could involve, in this example, implanting memories. It doesn't necessarily mean it's purposeful or non-purposeful, but it's to describe the process of practicing medicine and making a big clinical mistake.
Oh, like a big boo-boo?
Yeah. Iatrogenesis is sort of just something that could be mistake, could be just bad ideas, if that makes sense.
Right.
A little bit different than being like, I'm going to go in and fuck their lives up.
Right, just kind of like they mixed up the charts.
Yeah, or did something that was like irresponsible.
Right, so a little medical misstep, like maybe they mixed up the charts.
Or maybe they were practicing a form of therapy that is not effective, like recovered memory, right? So recovered memory therapy has been mostly debunked. Most people don't use it. Of course, people still do because therapists aren't really regulated in the same way that like a physician might be. But for the most part, it's been debunked by modern science. But you could argue that sort of medical misstep, it's problematic when the ignorance sort of becomes willful. Sort of how, the way what I would equate it to in modern times is sort of how nurses who maybe have far-right political leanings suddenly disregard their medical training and were recommending ivermectin to the public during the pandemic. They had all of the information needed to comprehend why that was nonsensical, but the other belief systems they held, aka maybe some conspiracies, overrode those critical thoughts. That could be said maybe for some of these therapists practicing these recovered memory practices. Like maybe they weren't consciously doing harm, but the faith of their, overriding high control religion was sort of like short circuiting, going, this probably is not ethical what I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Last week we discussed Rex Cockerhans and Ruth Kilpack, who have both been accused of drawing out false memories through unethical practices. They were far from alone in that. While the stories connected to Rex and Ruth are almost exclusively inside of the LDS bubble and really didn't stray too far from that inner culture, there was a much bigger case that managed to penetrate mainstream media due to its wide sweeping claims that were right in line with the other major SRA accusations that were occurring all over the world in that moment in time, roughly 1985. This is an excerpt from the book The Darker Side of Virtue, Corruption, Scandal, and the Mormon Empire.
One day during the summer of 1985, Miss Sheila Bowers of Lehi, Utah, went as usual to do her job at the Utah State Prison, leaving her 3 small children to be watched by her sister. While babysitting, however, the children's aunt saw and overheard things that disturbed her. When Miss Bowers returned home that night, her sister bluntly voiced her concern. She had caught the children, quote-unquote, playing nasty with their bodies. For youngsters, they definitely seemed to know far too many details about sex, as if they had been tutored by someone older.
So what that is description of is this woman and her children who end up being a much bigger part of this much bigger story. But as you heard with that, the children's aunt, Miss Sheila Bowers' sister, she felt like they were being too forthcoming with knowledge about sexual things. I think one of the first things that might be an issue with that, this is just my own personal notes, if they are a member of the LDS faith and they don't know themselves very much about sexuality, what are they considering too much knowledge of sex in that moment?
Right, like to know PP, you know?
Or just like normal kid play behavior.
Yeah.
Because there is such a fear of sex in that community. But that's just a side note.
NetCredit is here to say yes, because you're more than a credit score. Apply in minutes and get a decision as soon as the same day. Loans offered by NetCredit or lending partner banks and serviced by NetCredit. Application subject to review and approval. Learn more at netcredit.com/partners. NetCredit. Credit to the people.
Finding the music you love shouldn't be hard. That's why Pandora makes it easy to explore all your favorites and discover new artists and genres you'll love. Enjoy a personalized listening experience simply by selecting any song or album, and we'll make a station crafted just for you. Best of all, you can listen for free. Download Pandora on the Apple App Store or Google Play and start hearing the soundtrack to your life.
So Miss Sheila Bowers, she took these notes from her sister seriously. That she was like, that's concerning. I don't know what's happening there. And in a random turn of fate, Mrs. Bowers ended up speaking with the prison psychologist at the prison she worked at, who in turn recommended a therapist she knew was familiar with child abuse, Dr. Barbara Snow.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, who worked at the Intermountain Sexual Abuse Treatment Center, which at some point in time seems to have changed its name to the Intermountain Specialized Abuse Treatment Center and seems to have been operating as recently as 3 years ago. But this is in the 80s. Dr. Snow confirmed Mrs. Bowers' worst fears. Yes, her children were being sexually abused. It was one of their babysitters, who also happened to be the daughter of their ward's bishop. So when Mrs. Bowers took her children to this Dr. Snow, you're like, this is a specialist. She works at a sexual abuse treatment center. She's a doctor.
Yeah.
And when she's done treating these kids, she just says, yep, your kids were abused.
Oh, that's so horrifying. And you want to trust this person in this high regard.
Yes, it's horrifying to hear. Why would you be skeptical at the time? Why would a therapist make up such a bold claim, right? You want to believe them. They're professional. They're a freaking doctor. Because of the accusation being against the bishop of their local ward, it immediately caused an uproar in the local community because they're saying it's the bishop's daughter who's molesting these children, who's a 15-year-old. And so they're like, what's happening in her home? His daughter also babysat for lots of the other local kids in the area. Were they also victims? So this is something that's very quickly cascading. Miss Snow, Dr. Snow, received from this a whole new rash of clients as parents panicked over whether their kids had also fallen victim to this teenage girl. Bad news, Barbara says they all did. In fact, some of the kids were saying not only did this babysitter do these acts, but also her father, Bishop Keith Burnham, was participating as well. Not only that, some of the kids' very own parents were involved. So more and more as these kids are coming into these sessions, they're all suddenly recovering all of these memories of being abused by these people. Many children, because of this, were taken out of their homes in Lehi, Utah, and received what were very likely traumatic medical evaluations. No evidence was discovered, though physical evidence, of course, isn't always present in cases of child sexual abuse. So it wasn't just case closed there. Over the next year, chaos reigned in Lehi, Utah. Police were investigating. Children were continuing to see Barbara. Accusations were flying one after another. Kids seeing Dr. Snow suddenly remember, also my neighbors and my parents are doing all sorts of nasty on them. It's just more and more people.
Oh, this is so scary because you want to believe kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the big problems with the satanic panic. As the claims escalated, it became more and more difficult to believe. First, it was the sitter, then the sitter and her dad, then parents, then full branches of families, mass family orgies, and assaults involving 15 children at a time. Satan worship began to appear in their recovered memories. Robes and candles, violent sex acts that would have without a doubt left physical evidence behind.
Dr. Paul L. Whitehead, public affairs representative for the Utah Psychiatric Association, also interviewed some of the children and claimed that mental health professionals had already identified sex abuse rings in communities across the state. 2.5 years after the anxious Sheila Bowers first called for her appointment, Dr. Snow testified in court that she believed 40 adults were involved in Lehi's child sexual abuse scandal. Under oath, Dr. Whitehead concurred.
So not only has she made these wide sweeping accusations, it's gone to the point where it's in court, and then she has another doctor yes-anding her. So it's not looking good for everybody in Lehi, Utah. You can probably surmise why it's called a panic, why the satanic panic is called a panic. It became more preposterous by the day, but you don't want to question the children. What kind of monster doesn't believe the children?
Right.
And in fairness, you do want to believe if children are saying this. You don't want to dismiss a child saying, hey, I was sexually abused. And for the most part, of course, they weren't simply making it up. Technically, adults were making it up. And as children are small, vulnerable, malleable little beings, they listen to adults. An all-out battle of beliefs took center stage in the middle of Lehi. So we have half the town being accused, half the town, well, let's say a third of the town being accused. Mm-hmm. We have another third of the town going, you're all sick. You're all in a sex ring, you sickos. And then the other third being like, there's no way this is happening. And then that other, the second third going, you're probably one of them too.
Oh, God, this is so scary.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, like, if you tell someone over and over again, like, this happened, Natalie, you got a devil horn sewn onto your head and, you know, you were molested, then you're actually going to believe that. And that's, I don't know, traumatic in itself.
It is. There's a lot of evidence, and we'll get into that too. So there's a lot of scientific evidence that if you are given false memories, even if you realize it didn't happen, that you're still stuck with those things because you've been told over and over and over again to envision yourself in these horrible situations, sometimes with your parents, you know? And so having those memories of that is traumatic, you know what I mean? Just even if you know it's fake, you reliving those thoughts in your head make you feel bad. So this community was basically torn into pieces between 1985 and 1986. Again, the sides trying to point out the unlikelihood that this was occurring in this manner. The other side was then accusing them of a cover-up. The Utah government got involved, wanting to investigate the treatment facility where Barbara Snow worked out of. You see this playing out almost hauntingly the same in QAnon today. One side making hard-to-believe, somewhat magical claims, then calling the other side complicit when pointing out the rational unlikelihood of it. The biggest tragedy in this is that any real sexual abuse that might have been happening at the time got kind of swept away in these fantastical subplots. Because childhood sexual abuse, as we know, is a catastrophic issue inside of the LDS Church. So there was certainly sex abuse happening somewhere in there. It just wasn't in the way that Barbara Snow was dictating it, or probably not the same people that Barbara Snow was dictating was doing it. By putting distance from maybe the church's own failings by adding in pentagrams and pitchforks, they can claim we're the good guys. It's kind of like why I personally am trying to keep words out of my mouth like evil and monster. I don't always succeed, but I'm trying to keep, he's a demon, because there's a real issue we have as a species, as a people, with calling bad behavior demonic, thus separating the person from their own actions.
Right. I have noticed a big spiritual psychosis going on lately, like on Instagram Reels. People will say, like, there's evil in the world and evil in Hollywood and evil. I'm like, you really think that we're out here drawing pentagrams on these Hollywood parties
Yeah.
That's not the case. I've been to some of these parties. They're just asking, what are you working on right now?
Right. Most of the time it is just people
just trying to networking.
And of course there are real problems with like things like the Diddy parties. So there's always this kernel of truth to something. But then when you turn it into a fanatical space, you then invalidate the real victims in those situations by going, it's also Tom Hanks doing, he's drinking blood. It's like, no, if you say that, it all looks fake, and it's not. There are real things happening, but they're a lot easier to see than when you're trying to make it. It's like we keep saying with Occam's razor, it's not, you don't have to go 10 levels deep. It's right there.
It's right there. Or like Ellen DeGeneres during lockdown, she was like laying a certain way on her couch, and people were like, she's laying like the fool in the tarot card. Look it up. She's sending us signals. And I was like, I think she's just relaxing on her couch.
Yeah. Doing that could be classified as mental illness when you're seeing signs and stuff all the time. Whereas she is kind of a jerk. We found that out.
She is a huge cunt. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that she's now doing like gestures at you through the screen. That's where then that goes a little bit
cuckoo,
akimbo.
Yeah, she's just yelling at her assistants.
Right. So us doing that is also, I think, partly because we're able to now take in so much information from so many people for the first time in history. I think people are shocked that bad things happen everywhere all the time, because you see that the other thing you see a lot is people going, there's demons, it's just so different, whatever happened to the world. And it's like, baby girl, this has always been happening. You just didn't have access to the news stories 24/7. This is not new. This is stuff that has been going on since humans.
Yeah, actually, I would argue that we might be in one of the safer time periods.
We are technically on paper,
yeah,
yes.
Think about the Civil War.
Yeah.
Think about the the Black Plague.
Yeah, I mean, just disease, things like that. Yeah, absolutely. But, that's why we have to be really clear-headed when we're looking at cases like this, because we start by believing people, but we do have to take evidence into account, because some people are falsely accused who then end up, we've watched this happen during the Satanic Panic, that had their lives ruined. They did not deserve it. So in the late 80s Utah, there was a real reckoning happening with this concept of calling things demonic. Though there were open doubts about the validity of this citywide sex ring that was brought to light by Dr. Snow, it still resulted in a conviction of a father named Alan Hadfield, whose children, and ultimately he and his wife, were being counseled by Snow. In fact, his son's graphic accusations against him came just a week after Hadfield had nervously made a joke in session with Dr. Snow as she was listing off this roll call of all these adults in the town she said were a part of the satanic sex ring. He kind of made a joke being like, oh God, am I next? And then the next week, his son came out of a Barbara Snow therapy session saying, my dad did satanic sex abuse on me.
Wow.
So the trial of this guy was what led to at least more outside specialists. It was still Utah people, but it was removed enough that they could take the knowing her personally out of it to weigh in on the Dr. Snow's treatment. And it was the first time people were getting a real sense of she might not be doing ethical things in her therapy practices.
Yeah, this makes me scared just thinking about it. Like, when I can't make a joke, I can't speak up, I can't be too quiet. Because if you're too quiet, then what are you doing being quiet over there? If you're too vocal, what are you doing? Like, there's no good you can do.
No, this situation, it's one of the reasons Satanic Panic was so awful, and we have to talk about it and remember it, is because this is a hysteria. This is a thing that caused unknowable damage psychologically to people. People lost their freedom. People are still in the sex offenders registry from this.
Damn.
So this is another excerpt from the same book.
Dr. Stephen Golding, director of clinical psychology at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, was brought in as an expert witness by the defense lawyers. Dr. Golding had evaluated a videotape of Dr. Snow conducting a therapy session with Hadfield's son. His conclusion: Dr. Snow used leading, suggestive, and directed questions, putting words in the mouth of the boy. He testified that her techniques were subtly coercive, and highly questionable.
Added on to that, there was a bunch of different people who like chimed in about observing her doing her therapy, like, for example, through a two-way mirror, and that she would punish the kids when they denied the abuse by like not like being cold to them. And then when they finally admitted, quote unquote, to the abuse, she would like wrap them in a hug and like compliment them and be like, you're so strong and brave and you're doing the right thing. That sort of behavior. Something we covered when we covered the Teal Swan series, which if you want to go listen, there's Barbara Snow's covered in that one as well, is that they finally had to sort of give her context about pretend things that kids had told them, found her then feeding that information to the kids, and then the kids reporting what the cops made up.
Oh, so kind of like a honey trap?
A little bit.
Yeah. This reminds me of like Spanish Inquisition stuff when they're just like, you're a witch. Come on, we'll stop drowning you until if you admit it. And then they would just kill you, but the pain would be over. So that's why there's so many quote unquote witches, is people that just, they wanted to be stopped tortured.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is not far from that. And it's definitely been called that by specialists. Even other counselors, by the way, at this bizarre sexual abuse treatment center expressed concerns over Barbara's methods. So even her colleagues inside of the center were like, what she's doing is not the same thing we're doing. All of this valid criticism wasn't enough, however. The father was found guilty on 4 counts of child sexual abuse and sentenced to prison.
No.
Despite there being the opposite of evidence for most of the claims. There was zero physical evidence of anything, and there were often ways to disprove claims made by the kids via Snow, like including like them talking about instances and him being able to prove like he was on the phone or he was like at the store when they say this thing happened.
Oh my God. Can he sue her?
I don't think in polite Mormon community that was something that people would do.
They just had to take, did he go to prison?
Mm-hmm. He didn't spend as long as his sentence was. He made sort of like a plea deal, but he was forever, by some people, forever, he is a satanic child molester.
And
you know?
All because he made a joke of like, it's me next, haha.
Pretty much.
Pandora makes it easy for you to find your favorite music. Discover new artists and genres by selecting any song or album, and we'll make you a personalized station for free. Download on the Apple App Store or Google Play and enjoy the soundtrack to your life.
Nearly home. Isn't home where we all want to be? Reba here for Realtor.com, the pros' #1 most trusted app. Finding a home is like dating. You're not just looking for a place to live, you're searching for the one. That's where Realtor.com comes in. Like any good matchmaker, they know exactly where to look. With over 500,000 new real listings straight from the pros every month, you could find your perfect match today. Ranch style with a pool, barn dominium with an in-law suite? Realtor.com's got them. Modern craftsman with a big yard and a treehouse out back? Realtor.com will have you saying, yep, that's the one. No more swiping. It's time to start finding. Download the Realtor.com app today, cause you're nearly home. Make it real with Realtor.com.
Pros #1 most trusted app based on August 2024 proprietary survey. Over 500,000 new listings every month based on average new for sale and rental listings. February 2024 through January 2025.
So I think that also in this court case that happened, most people kind of believed that Snow's therapeutic methods were also, you know, they were misleading. But this weird thing about being a human, like part of the human condition, it seems, is sometimes when this stuff happens, people just shrug and go, well, the kid said it and she's a therapist, so I guess put him in jail.
Right.
Let's just move forward. Let's just move on. You know what I mean?
Right, because it's kind of like case closed.
Yeah. Because after the charges and him getting sentenced, it almost seemed like in Lehigh, a fever broke and people didn't want to talk about the sex ring anymore. This seemingly would have disproven Alan's charges, but it seems like they just wanted to forget about it almost.
Right, he's in jail, so he'll be the scapegoat. It's all done now. It's all done.
A little bit. It's just so strange. It's just such a weird part of human psychology. It can be so enraging. You know, we see this happen all the time when a community stands behind a sexual predator. But there are also instances when someone is wrongly convicted and they should be standing behind him. And in this case, a lot of people did stand behind him and defend him. And, you know, you hate to see it when there's like a lot of evidence somebody did something really bad to a kid and people are like, no, he's better. He's a nice man. But like in this case, there was no evidence whatsoever that any of this happened.
And standing behind him could be dangerous
Yeah.
because you might be next.
It was, by all accounts, a really horrible time in Lehigh. It really ruined a lot of lives. Alan, again, didn't have to spend as long in jail as he was charged, but to
He
some...
should have spent a day in jail.
Yeah. And he would always be, no matter what the results were, you know, even though the kids like eventually were like, oh, this didn't happen, some people were going to see him as a satanic sex priest for the rest of his life.
God, and like as a kid, can you imagine growing up and like developing a frontal lobe and then saying, oh my God, I put my dad in jail?
Yeah.
For like wrong accusations based on things that were put in my head because I'm a kid.
We covered a little bit about one of those kids' stories on the Teal Swan series if you want to go back, but there was a really well done journalistic podcast featuring an adult kid who had put his father in jail and the repercussions of that mentally for him.
Yeah.
And also speaking to the father. It's heartbreaking. But his dad is out of jail, but he's a sex offender still, even though the son's like, I know this didn't happen. This was put in by my mom.
Oh, I hate it.
My mom was mentally ill and she like did this. Even though Barbara's methods were heavily criticized in this time period, she seemingly faced no consequences other than resigning from the Intermountain sexual trauma place. But she just moved a little bit away and opened her own practice. She didn't have any markers on her record, nothing. They just, again, I think Lehigh was like, let's just move forward and like let other people deal with it. And so she just left the town and went somewhere else in Utah. And that is something we're going to see mirrored hauntingly when we get into more contemporary cases with how these sort of unethical psychotherapy people cases are just sort of been like excused, but like just like go down the street. Just let's just move forward.
Yeah, somebody else's problem.
Yeah. Just a couple years after Lehigh had finally settled down, Babs was at it again.
No.
In another part of Utah. Suddenly, every family she was seeing in every community had abused children in it, and often it was the parents who were involved. Another sex ring found. What a brave woman.
Sounds like she's got a lot of squirrels up in that head.
Yeah. And you could question either did she experience abuse when she was younger, or was some of the LDS teachings and doctrine messing with her when she was getting her doctorate?
Right, because it sounds very brutal. Like when you have this sort of black and white way of thinking, and then you grow up in the world, it can be kind of gray sometimes. And then it just feels like a belt tightening around my brain. And then it's just like, one day you snap and you're like, fuck it, there's satanic cabals everywhere.
Yeah. I do wonder. Again, I've said it so many times, but you can go see her right now. She is a practicing therapist today. And man, I would love to interview her. I don't think she'd be interviewed by me, but I am just so curious about how she ended up in that mindset. So she found this, she went to the second community, found another sex ring, then a third community of people she found. You're not going to believe this.
Another sex ring?
Another satanic sex ring. By this time, this was 1988. It's that awful experience of the U.S. justice system that is like, well, he was convicted. We don't really want to go through the paperwork, dismantling what happened. So we're just going to ignore what Snow is doing and instead make a new law saying you can be charged if you coerce someone into making an abuse claim. So even though they know that most likely she coerced these stories out of the kids, they're not going to do anything about it. They're just now going to put a law on the books. Like she just skated it. And they're like, well, because she did this stuff, let's make a law that people can't do that.
Just getting away with it. This lady does look like she would bump into you at Costco and not say, I'm sorry.
Oh, she's a very Karen-haired person. Yeah, it just kind of feels like they knew Barbara was doing it, and they just didn't feel like dealing with it. Sociologists and social scientists use a phrase called subversion myth. It's just the act of undermining or contradicting the values of a myth, often to replace it with a new myth that serves a different purpose. You could argue that something like this you could possibly apply it to something like the Satanic Temple regarding how people perceive things like knowledge, personal autonomy, devilish in some churches. That is the idea that that's evil and bad. And the Satanic Temple is sort of repurposing the idea that, like, is that bad though? Is the devil bad if he's saying that you should have personal autonomy and knowledge? So you could also possibly use the idea of subversive myth in the case of pushing the concept of satanic sex rings being the source of sexual abuse, not our people. The truth is there are no safe groups. So if you're pushing the idea that sexual abuse is happening in the outside groups and not your group, that's either willfully ignorant or you are trying to cover things up, because there is no group that's immune to that. There's no immune groups, only groups who either hold offenders accountable or hide them to protect their own image. So this isn't as cut and dry as all Mormon authorities are cover-uppers, at least not to the same degree. During this time period, there's famously a document called the Pace Memorandum, which was written by General Authority Glenn L. Pace, which sought to examine the 60-plus claims of satanic ritual abuse inside the Mormon Church around 1990. You know, to remind you, this wasn't just a Barbara Snow issue. This was therapists were doing this all over the place, and there were a lot of accusations flying around.
Yeah, and this is also early internet, early TV shows like the Maury Povich show.
Daytime television.
It's a big fame grab.
Yeah. It was and I think I mentioned this doc on the previous episode, but Satan Wants You is really a great documentary about this whole phenomenon. So there were people even inside the church trying to take this seriously and really examine it and have real, a process of justice go through and see if any of this was real. But the thing with that is so the Pace Memorandum was the insiders trying to see if there really was satanic ritual abuse happening inside the church. But you don't see that energy when there is plausible evidence of just plain old regular abuse of power through intimidation, sexual abuse.
Yeah, what about the guy we talked about right at the top?
Yeah.
He's fine.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
then
exactly.
This made up devil scapegoat.
Yes.
Where are they?
Yes. Again, right there, but they want to say, well, no, it's happening through magic rituals in the basement. But it's no, it's just the guy who's the stake president.
Yeah.
So regardless, Snow had other people over this time in the late 80s to early 90s banished and arrested, including another father named Arden Brett Bullock in 1986. Despite the very high likelihood that his accusations were false, he to this day remains on the sex offender registry.
Damn.
Also, there didn't seem to be anybody putting a stopper on her throughout this time. She was going hog wild with this doctorate she had, and no one was going to stop it, I guess, because of course she wasn't done as soon as the 90s hit. No. Not as soon as the satanic panic was over, she didn't suddenly go, oh, I might have been mistaken. She didn't. She seems to have just kind of quadrupled down. There was no Ross Perot showing up in the scene didn't make her go, I really need to rethink my ideologies. That Ross Perot, he has got some good thoughts. 1992. So no, she kept doing her own thing. And among her other, I guess we'll call them achievements, she therapized a young Mary Bosworth around 2004, who then claimed she had arrived to Dr. Snow with her satanic memories already intact later on when defending herself against the criticism she would face, because Mary Bosworth is better known as Teal Swan, a New Age guru or sadistic grifter, depending on who you're talking to. According to the testimonies of people who knew Teal Swan in her younger years, Teal's wild claims of satanic ritual abuse are not only near impossible, that she didn't begin her origin story until after being seen by Barbara Snow.
Oh, right. Because if you're a spiritual guru, just saying like, oh, my parents worked for the national parks and, I just kind of grew up in the woods a little bit. That's not as enticing. It's like, I was sewn inside a body.
Yes.
Listen to me and give me your money and time.
Yes, exactly. So even though Teal Swan now, in retrospect, says, I came into Barbara Snow's office already with my recovered memories, nobody has any record or evidence of her ever saying that her memories until she started seeing Barbara Snow.
Is it like that girl that always says she was raised so poor? And it's like, girl, you had horses growing up.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? You had an in-ground pool.
A little bit. Yeah. So there's that. And then there's been, people from her childhood who also have a lot of proof to say that the abuse she's describing could not have possibly happened. Not to mention the abuse she describes would have left massive mutilations on her body and things like that. So while it's entirely possible that Teal Swan experienced some form of trauma as a kid, we can't know that. Her telling of her childhood ritual abuse is straight out of Barbara Snow's handbook. Teal, unfortunately, now incorporates these harmful recovered memory practices into her retreats and her seminars that also involve things like visualizing your own suicide, amongst other truly messed up practices.
This is like a disease. It's just spreading.
Yeah. So she didn't get in trouble for that. She was still practicing these things in 2004, 2005. It was only in 2006 when Barbara Snow's license was even questioned for a suspension. When it was discovered, she was providing therapy to multiple family members who themselves were most likely a part of the LDS church, which is already unethical to be giving therapy to family members. I don't know that it's a law, but you're not supposed to be giving therapy to like your sister or your brother-in-law or things like that. And during these sessions, which we later find out she had been giving therapy to her family for at least 15 years, which again, not supposed to do, that she had convinced them of all sorts of insanity. It also kind of didn't. Like some of them were like, I don't think any of this is real. You're kind of freaking me out. And so eventually they had to file a complaint against her. Here's an excerpt from that family member's complaint to the board.
Snow then entered the residence and asked if relative's husband was home. After finding out that he was not, she went into his office and, quote, started swearing and smashing things, including a laptop computer and office equipment, end quote, causing thousands of dollars worth of damage. There were numerous witnesses to these events, including both family members being treated by Snow. In fact, they attempted to stop Snow from causing more damage, but she began to hit them with a bat, too, and both reported they were bruised by Snow. She smashed the laptop along with our home computer, printer, pictures, and everything in the room, including me, one complaint said. When we tried to stop her, Snow claimed that the relative knew about the abuse and let it happen. So she is fucking crazy. And I hate to throw that word out there, but like, bitch, in my house?
Yeah, it's not
breaking stuff?
I wouldn't call it sane.
No, I'd knock her upside the fucking head.
Well, they did at least reach out to complain about her license at that point. She did all of this because she had been convinced by her brain, I guess, that this relative's husband, who, by the way, was her brother, Snow's brother, was that he was a part of some insidious sex ring again, despite no evidence, and then went like, I have to go destroy his files. Which is not what a therapist should be doing. And we cover, again, if you want to go listen to Teal Swan, we do cover this. We can move on from Snow. She's fascinating. I could talk about her longer, but we don't need to, because the overarching sentiment I'm trying to get across is that there were many LDS therapist practitioners whose doctrinal, laden brains were really confused when they were receiving scientific information, right? They kind of like don't work together necessarily.
I feel like Barbara Snow is like a lesbian maybe, and that's like a big no-no in her head, and then she's just lashing out at everybody, and like it seems like she's accusing a lot of dudes because she probably hates men because she's into women and is mad about her own sexuality, and instead of confronting that, fucks everyone else's lives up.
It's possible. And I think maybe you're also conflating, or not conflating, but I think maybe also you're seeing notes of who we will be speaking of, who is none other than Jodi Hildebrandt next week, which she is doing all of those things, Jodi. She is it's most likely she is gay, and she has dealt with that in extremely unhealthy ways.
Ooh, this is again that like the belt around the brain and that black and white, right and wrong, and there's one way to live your life, and it turns you into this.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't seem like it keeps you mentally well. So Barbara, Rex, and Ruth are three of many therapists who have participated in this same sort of recovered memory therapy. And I'm sure each of them come with their own set of life experiences that led them to practice that. Being Mormon is definitely one of them. Mormonism has many factors we might consider harmful, but one aspect in particular seems to have caused an extraordinary amount of damage in the mental health world, and that is sexual shame. Sexual shame and purity culture leads to so many destructive teachings, and I truly don't know if there is another modern religion who has incorporated the medical mental health field so deeply into their shame culture. Satanic ritual abuse has made a comeback in pop culture during Trumpism, but how that's reflected in Mormon communities and mental health is even more insidious than just regular old satanic panic. Taking a cue from it, however, the obsession over alleged sex addiction has created a crater of darkness in this community. Don't worry, demons are still brought into it. But in these circles, the cloaked, the robed, candlelit metalheads in basements have been replaced with those harlots inside of your phone. It's Jodi Hildebrandt o'clock, everyone.
I am seeing a big rise, and I consider it two beasts fighting each other. When you go on Twitter, and it's one tweet is from a prophet of God who is just condemning all women as horrible whores and fuck you and come to my church or you're going to go to hell. And then the next one is like a very young sex worker who's trying to get money. Mm-hmm. And then people are like calling her every name in the book. But then that's kind of like, what am I trying to say? I'm now off of Twitter, but I noticed that if you were not sexually promiscuous and like showing cleavage and like, which if you want to do that, great, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it was almost like expected that you should do that.
Right.
You know?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, it's a community causing their own downfall and then blaming other people for it kind of. Yeah. Yeah. The people who are buying the OnlyFans are the ones who are
angry
like,
about
you
it.
are demons.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same, the self-reports when guys go on and they're like, these apps are evil. All that is on them are women who fart in mini skirts.
It's like, that's what you like.
Sir, never had one of those come up on mine.
Right.
Potentially because of what you're consuming.
And if you're just like a normal gal tweeting who's just kind of like, hey, here I am, whatever, blah, my regular life, you're almost demonized for not being slutty.
Sure.
It was a weird, I'm so glad I'm off that site, but it was so weird.
Please, everyone, get off of it. There's nothing to gain from it. There really isn't. That's it.
That's it.
See you next time.
It's just, but like sick people.
Yes.
They're
people
sick.
People are
sick in the head.
They are.
They need I think they need an authoritarian, someone to tell them what to do, because in their brain, freedom and sort of thinking for yourself and your own autonomy is scary.
Well, I think they need that. I don't think they do. I don't think they should have that. It seems like it's going poorly.
Oh yeah, like the guy that fucking shot himself in the head.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where this leads.
Come on, guys. Let's get it together. Next week, we're going to begin to break down the history of LDS sex addiction clinics and how normal sexual urges have been manipulated and perverted into demonic actions.
Hey, this is Will Arnett, host of Smartless. Smartless is a podcast with myself and Sean Hayes and Jason Bateman, where each week one of us reveals a mystery guest to the other two. We dive deep with guests that you love, like Bill Hader, Selena Gomez, Jennifer Aniston, David Beckham, Kristen Stewart, and tons more. So join us for a genuinely improvised and authentic conversation filled with laughter and newfound knowledge to feed the smartless mind. Listen to Smartless now on the SiriusXM app. Download it today.
If you're frustrated with low sex drive, Vyleesi can help. Vyleesi, or bremelanotide, treats low sex drive in women with no daily medication, no alcohol restrictions, and no hormones. Vyleesi is clinically proven to increase your interest in sex. Take control of your sex life on your terms and visit Vyleesi.com to schedule a telemedicine appointment. That's VYLEESI.com. Vyleesi is a prescription medicine used to treat hypoactive sexual desire disorder, HSDD, in premenopausal women who have not had problems with low sexual desire in the past and have low sexual desire no matter the type of sexual activity, situation, or partner. The low sexual desire is troubling to them and is not due to medical, mental health, or relationship problems, or medicine or other drug use. Do not use Vyleesi if you have uncontrolled hypertension or known heart disease. The most common side effects include nausea, flushing, injection site reactions, headache, and vomiting. Consult your healthcare professional for more information and see full PI at Vyleesi.com or call 800-922-1038. Go to Vyleesi.com for a telemedicine appointment to find out if Vyleesi is right for you. That's VYLEESI.com.